Welcome to the program. Along with the rest of the world, Australians have been transfixed and horrified by the devastating images from the northern coast of Japan. It's feared more than 20,000 people may have died after Friday's massive earthquake and related tsunami. Waves of churning mud and debris obliterated entire towns. Almost 500,000 people have fled the disaster zone, thousands more are struggling to get food and water, and millions have been left without power. It's being described as the island nation's biggest crisis since the Second World War. And tonight, efforts are continuing to prevent a meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear reactor complex north of Tokyo. We'll have expert analysis of the unfolding nuclear crisis, and we'll cross to Tokyo to hear from one of the international relief agencies trying to help those displaced by the disaster. But our coverage tonight begins in the devastated seaside town of Sendai, where I spoke to ABC correspondent Shane McLeod just moments ago. Shane McLeod, where you are is close to the epicentre of the quake. What's happening now in Sendai?
Well, it's quite remarkable actually. Large parts of the city have actually fared pretty well from the quake. The areas that we've been driving around today that have been badly affected are those down near the waterways where the tsunami has come ashore, and it's done some immense damage down there. But where we are here, the real problem is just the lack of utilities like power and water is a big problem. You can see people behind me here, they're queuing up to access food and water and the sort of support that they need as the city sort of tries to live an ongoing life at the moment.
What have the aftershocks been like? I presume that must be fraying people's nerves a little bit.
Yeah, we've had a couple this afternoon, not particularly big ones, but people are certainly on edge. I mean, the seismologists here in Japan are talking about the aftershocks from this quake being pretty substantial earthquakes in themselves. I mean, the main earthquake was nearly 9 magnitude. They're talking about perhaps an aftershock in the next few days that could be as much as magnitude 7. So when you're talking about aftershocks of that kind of scale, you've really got to start to worry again about the problems of tsunamis, the problems of buildings being affected, perhaps collapsing. So it's a very difficult time. People are trying to clean up, they're trying to rebuild, they're trying to get things back in order, but they're still having to deal with these earthquakes.
Shane, tell us a little bit more about that then. What is the latest with the search and rescue mission there?
Well, the authorities are basically trying to spread out right across this region to find the communities that are the worst affected. We're here in Sendai, which is the prefectural capital, and this is the headquarters for that operation. And today we've been in town where there are just hundreds and hundreds, it seems, of trucks from the Self-Defence Force, helicopters flying overhead. They're getting out to areas particularly to the north of here. The coastline, I guess you'd call it a lot more rugged, and the communities there are a lot more isolated. And some of the pictures we're seeing from there just indicate that entire towns have just been obliterated. There's one photograph being carried in the afternoon newspapers here in Japan today that shows a town that's essentially one building left, and all around it is just rubble and debris, and there's just one building left standing in the middle of the town.
You mentioned before the absence of power and water. Just how difficult is that making the job of the rescue teams?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, parts of the city do have electricity, parts of the city appear to have water supplies, but they've been substantially disrupted right across the city. So it is making things difficult. We're seeing people having to queue for basic services, for basic water and food. They're gathering at shops. Some shops are being set up as the distribution points for that type of thing. There are thousands of people living in aid centres, in accommodation that the government is providing for them. I've heard of one centre where there's more than 1,500 people in one hall alone. So for people who've had their houses, their buildings damaged, they're having to go into that accommodation. For other people, they're in their own homes, but they're having to rely on these distribution centres for those basic food and water.
What are you hearing about what's going on further north from where you are?
Well, we're hearing about just total destruction. Some villages just entirely wiped out. I know that there was an Australian consular team trying to get into that region today, and it's been immensely difficult for them. They've been going in just trying to check on the welfare of Australian citizens who are there. But it's very difficult for people to get into those areas. And the people who've managed to survive, they're left essentially having to fend for themselves until the government is able to get services in. But there is a massive effort underway. They're using helicopters particularly to get into those communities.
And Shane, how much anxiety is there about the nuclear issue that we've been hearing so much about?
Well, I think people are very anxious about that, and more news just keeps evolving, just keeps coming out about that. The difficult problem for the authorities is that these are the very same areas where they're trying to help people, where these nuclear power plants are located. There's one to the north of here that is the subject of problems at the moment. There is one obviously to the south of here, Fukushima, where there's been another explosion today. They seem to bracket the area that's worst affected by this earthquake, and people are trying to get into those zones, but at the same time people are being evacuated from those zones because of the threat from those nuclear facilities.
Okay, Shane McLeod, we'll leave it there. Take care of yourself. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.
That was Shane McLeod there in Sendai, northern Japan.